Hello, my name is cannedcream, CC for short, and today I'd like to talk to you about
magic!
Shut up, you weirdo.
or rather, exactly how I think magic works in Equestria. For a fun drinking game, take a shot every time I say magic this episode. I promise you that by the end, you will be dead. From what I can deduce about what we've seen of the current seasons of MLP, there are several different types and subtypes of magic, which I think can be summarized into three main tiers, which I'm now about to list from strongest to weakest. At the very top, unicorn magic, or natural magic, which I'm going to explain more in depth later on. Level 2, conjuring magic, as witnessed by Sakura through her incantations, rituals, and potions. And at the very bottom, relic magic, as in a magic that comes from special items or locations that either creates or boosts those properties. Now, no matter what type, each school does seem to have one thing in common, which is a conduit. Each tier has some focal point that bridges the gap between the creation of magical powers and their actual physical use, which is the part that we see. I'm going to speculate at exactly what these conduits are for each tier. And, just to be doubly confusing, I'm going to start with tier 2. Because that's how numbers work. Besides, conjuring magic actually does make for a good starting point because I believe it takes its inspiration from real-life magical practices from various cultures throughout human history. And for an in-universe example of this, I'm going to point to Sakura. The rituals, enchantings, and brews are to appease the nature of the magic she is seeking to acquire, perhaps trying to tap directly into Equestria's spiritual world. Thus, her spells are her conduit, one that likely changes as the power themselves change. While it is, I believe, possible for conjuring magic to be learned by anyone, if Sakura is anything to go by, clearly it takes years of intense dedication to the art in order to do so. And even then, there's no guarantee of talent or advancement. The power of this magic is limited by the skill of the user, as well as their ability to acquire the necessary objects and recipes. Let's move down the list to the weakest tier, relic magic. As seen in Magical Duel, items can be infused with magic to give any creature that possesses it artificial power, or a boost to their own personal talents. The amulet that Trixie uses amps up her own abilities, making her able to cast spells beyond even that of Twilight, despite being the dedicated student that she is. In fact, Twilight only wins at the end of this episode not by overpowering Trixie, but just by outsmarting her. Another example I'd like to give is the elements of harmony themselves. They would actually be a perfect example of item enchantment.
Enchantment!
These are pieces of jewelry infused with raw magic, made for a singular purpose, and able to grant the ability to wield its power to any user. Fluttershy, Applejack, Rainbow Dash, and Pinkie Pie are all able to use their own element's magic, and Twilight and Rarity see their own power increased. In both these cases, the magic is not necessarily coming from the pony, but just the item the pony possesses. The item itself can be the conduit. The reason I decided to label this the weakest school is because it is limited to whatever specific task the item was designed for, and can likely only be made in the first place by someone from the first or second tier of magic, natural or conjured. But this is actually the only magic that can be wielded by any creature, no matter of their skill or species. For this, I'm going to cite too many Pinkie Pies. Pinkie clearly has no magical abilities of her own, except for that fourth wall breaking ADD and possibly her pinky sense, but that is an entirely different subject and I'm not about to delve into that. Anyway, by knowing the exact location of the mirror pond as well as the correct words to speak before going into it, she's able to use its power to copy herself many times over. And on the surface, this might look like conjuring magic, and I do admit it is really close. But the difference comes from the fact that Pinkie is not the one actually casting the magic by any means. She's just using what's already there, and using it for the sole purpose the pond's magic was infused with. If she wanted to do something like grow 10 times her normal size, which, oh my god, that's terrifying, she might not be able to create the magic to do it, nor could she use the mirror pond for that. So yeah, it's pretty much the entry-level tier of magic. It's accessible to anyone in the know, but very, very limited in its power and its scope. Now for the strongest tier. The real meat of my theories about how magic works in this cartoon filled with colorful ponies. Natural magic. When Twilight steps into Poison Joke and Bridal Gossip, it kept her from being able to cast any magic. Thus, we can clearly see that a unicorn's power comes from the horn, making the horn the conduit. If this wasn't already pretty obvious enough, they do fire all their spells from their horn in the first place, but it was still worth mentioning. Okay, now here's the thing. When a unicorn uses magic, they tend to just do it. There's no special items or symbols or words. It just happens. The only exception seems to come from especially strong magic, like the kind we saw in Magical Mystery Cure, when Twilight's spell from Star Swirl pretty much rewrites reality, by changing the very destinies and memories of her friends, and possibly even the town itself. That is definitely some strong damn magic. So, with a few exceptions, the rule does appear to be that, on the surface, unicorn magic just happens. I am not happy with that. All magic in fiction seems to come from some source, and I don't like the idea that MLP would be any different. In fact, I actually do believe we've been shown several times now where unicorn magic comes from, how it works, how it acts. What I think is the source of unicorn magic is in fact raw emotion. And I don't think that's hard to believe in a universe where friendship is an actual physical presence so strong it pretty much deserves its own place in the periodic table of elements. Let me explain my reasoning here. Natural magic, I believe, can be broken down into 3 subcategories: light, neutral, and dark. Neutral magic appears to be among the easiest to cast, and is likely the first spells that unicorns will learn when they're foals. They seem to be powered by harnessing the emotions of calmness and tranquility, and are powered by concentration. The very easiest spell, I believe, would be levitation. For my example, I want to turn to Rarity for this one. Magic is not necessarily a very big part of Rarity's life. I would go so far as to say that Rarity is actually rather weak with magic, as Fluttershy is to flying. Both can perform their respected acts, but with limitations that set them either just on par or just below their peers. The exception being when it comes to finding gems, which is Rarity's natural skill. More often than not, Rarity prefers to do things for herself, and is one of the few unicorns we don't see constantly spamming their powers over every inconsequential task. What magic we do see her using is kind of the same spell we see every unicorn use, even side and background characters like Trixie or Vinyl Scratch: levitation. Hell, even a 1-month-old pumpkin cake can make herself float and fly. Though I attest to that being that the cakes are some kind of weird child prodigies, as Pound Cake learned to fly at 1 month, and Scootaloo is still trying to figure that out. It's important to note that the pony is required to keep their concentration on the object or risk dropping it. It's the reason that, despite Rarity using her magic heavily when working, to give herself that extra pair of hooves, we never see her pumping out an assembly line of clothing, even when she really needed to. She would be unable to split her concentration in so many different directions and do so many different tasks without everything just falling apart around her. Light magic is powered by feelings of love, happiness, friendship, and joy. We see an example of what could be a light spell in Twilight's flashback of Cadence in A Camelot Wedding, when she makes a couple stop fighting and love each other again, complete with pinkish-colored lights and little floating hearts. She was transfusing her own feelings of love to them, making them remember their affections for each other. Though, personally, I saw this cute scene as very disturbing. In my eyes, what Cadence did was close to brainwashing, and it was apparently totally okay, but that's besides the point. Anyway, the opposite of light would obviously be dark magic. It's going to be on the other end of the spectrum, and thus would be powered by anger, hatred, jealousy, fear, sorrow. It literally is the black magic of Equestria. In the Crystal Empire, any spell cast by King Sombra was colored a very dark hue, being powered by the evil in his heart. Even Celestia, when using her magic to visually show what Sombra had done to the former empire, has her magic turn temporarily black when it's fired from her horn, perhaps powered and overtaken by her fear of the king.
Well, I didn't vote for you.
Furthermore, I propose that there are actually very few spells that solely belong in one single alignment, but rather the spells are sort of a template, and the emotion is the paint that determines the final product. Almost any spell can be used and powered by any alignment. For further evidence, I want to point to Lesson 0, and very specifically, the One It Needed spell. Okay, again, ignoring the fact that Equestria has a crazy amount of brain rape magic, let's just look at the spell itself. It turned half the town into thralls who fought viciously over a rag doll. I find it a little unlikely that this spell was designed to make ponies nearly kill each other. As disturbing of a magic as this is, it's likely very first conceived as a way to make a singular pony or a small group of ponies infatuated and enthralled with a very particular item. But when Twilight used the spell, look at what her emotions were. They were depression, fear, anxiety, and a half-mad desire from her need to have something to write Celestia about. What Twilight casted was a dark spell that she had superpowered from her own lack of self-control. If she had used the One It Needs spell under a different frame of mind, it's actually kind of easy to see the ponies gathering around and sharing Smarty Pants happily, though they would still be very much brainwashed. But here, fueled by the influence of Twilight's personal emotions, the ponies were ready to flat out murder each other in a fit of mad desire, just like what Twilight was going through. Of course, everything I'm suggesting is just my own personal opinion, but the evidence does kind of seem to fit the theory. However, I would definitely love to see an outside opinion on this. If you have your own thoughts about how magic works in Equestria, go ahead and post them below. I'd love to read them. And if you like what you saw in this video, subscribe to see more from me. Thank you very much for watching, and remember,
stay pony, my friends.